we're gonna play the media assets. All right. So to play that, 30 seconds.
Created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality algorithm, and
I think you will have a whole levels of robotics, the humanoid robots or non-humanoid robots, whatever the case is.
But the one that I really gravitated towards was Alteryx. Low code, no code, business intelligence stuff, data science, machine learning, things like that.
Audio, or text, and then there's big metaverse buzz. Everybody knows the metaverse.
Another week of AI.
We have AI going through everybody's ears right now. It's probably shaking Vaughn's head like, what is
welcome.
This? I like it.
Well, another episode of AI. There you go. Good to have Lucky back.
welcome, Vaughn.
But I've been really getting fan of Masako's AI. Come on.
I like it.
Mine is more of a yodel. Or maybe a native call. You know, I got that blood.
I see it now. I see it. Bobby, what's your background? Show us.
I was born on the river. No.
On the river.
See, if I have to do it correctly, I have to do like, because you know that's how we say we screwed up.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we did, you know, it's my fault, but the thing is, you know, we have lots of technical talk, right? I do technical talking all the time, and Lucky's there to kind of leash me back in. Masako's there to leash me back in. Like, hey, it's a lot of technical talk, but we're really going to have to talk business today. No technical, right? Business. However, I want to throw in some technical information just so that the audience can kind of feel like, you know, I never heard of it, but I'm curious now. I want to find that out, right? It's a little bit of technical detail. So I'm going to leash myself a little bit, right? I'm going to talk a little bit less technical, but let's talk more business because we have somebody who's just of course, Masako is the business guru, but we literally have somebody who's Masako's good friend and, you know, somebody who has a lot of business experience, a military veteran. She's going to join us to say like, hey, what are you guys are talking about? What is this large language model? How can business use this? What happens to the future of business process? And what is it like to do business optimization using large language model? So you keep hearing large language model. If you're not familiar with it, it's because it's AI. It's just what ChatGPT is. But ChatGPT is not called large language model. So today's discussion is about, you know, I'm a project manager and what's in it for me to know about large language model. And when we talk about project managers, we sort of identify them as that meat in the sandwich, right? Whatever's going on, these project managers are the ones that, you know, handling everything downstream and upstream, right? So I'll pause there. Let's go around and get everybody's thought in it because we're getting ready to talk some business and learn some business, but around large language models. Lucky?
Yeah. Well, kind of not trying to get too much in the technical and trying to stay, you know, on the surface is, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for the layman to persons that are not involved with the development or production of a large language model to take advantage of what a large language model can do for you. You know, what are the benefits? You know, when you're in different, you know, you have different roles, and one is knowledge management. You know, that how do you manage your data, and that data, how do you feed it into a model? Without getting into that, you can take advantage of areas like, for example, safety. there's going to be a lot of safety documentation. There's going to be a lot of processes. There's going to be regulations. A lot of that data sometimes is not ready available, and you may have people that you're bringing into the industry or people that you got to explain things to, and a lot of terms aren't readily available. And then it's easier to develop a database that has a lot of that data for you that you can just feed to customers, and it's not super techy, but at the end you end up speaking to the customer when you're not able to. And so maybe that can be yeah, another representation of your organization. Says, hey, as we go down this road, I'll be there for you, but if we don't, we have Jarvis, or a form of something that can help lead you down the road that's specific to your organization, and you can customize that. And so there's opportunity to build solutions for your customers where you don't have to be there every second. Because I know sometimes you want to go on vacation. You want to be able to do more with your time, and be able to still develop and give people what they need. And a large language model that feeds off of what whatever your business provides as far as training, safety, that can be vetted through a model, and you have yourself a new best friend. And so maybe we can talk about that. How do we start to kind of get to that area? What is a large language model, first of all? And we can kind of define that today, and what knowledge management is. Bobby, he's big into, what I can't fill in, he'll fill the gaps in because, he has a lot of experience in those areas, being able to say, hey, okay, you have your, you have different ways of providing services. Is that a realistic way? Can AI help you do it better? So we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Masako, I know you're ready. You're just so excited to introduce your friend right now.
Yeah, so you know what? I'm lucky enough to have the opportunity to sit with all of you geniuses, and you're all geniuses in your own right, because each of you carry a flame within that, gets you up in the morning, and you show up each day serving the community that is nearest and dearest to your heart, in the category of which you are a subject matter expert in. And so I get the opportunity to introduce my good friend Vaughn today. I call her the OG. And she's the OG because her mindset is boss. She is an original individual that recognizes what you can get with hard work, however, does smart work. And that's why I call her she the OG. She does smart work, and she does it across the globe. And not only is she doing it for herself and her many organizations, the organizations that she runs sows into so many people's lives, giving them an opportunity to, leverage their knowledge for them to, have a change of trajectory if something happened, right? Oftentimes things happen in people's lives. And if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have someone to hold the mirror to you and say, you know what, that may have happened to you, but that's not who you are. And so for that, she's an OG, because she sees people with her heart. She looks into their heart, and then she puts them in position. I always say, we help people leverage their knowledge so they could be spiritually, physically, and mentally wealthy.
Yeah.
When you could show people how to capitalize and maximize their unique gifts and talents within them for them to live their best life, to me, that's an OG. And that's Vaughn Griggs. to me.
That's a superpower right there.
Yeah.
That is absolutely amazing. I'm so glad to meet you, Vaughn. The ability to help people transform their lives or level up is really a blessing, right? Because you are blessed by watching people grow. It's like an opportunity, right? Rare opportunity in life to watch people grow. And both in what you do and how you do it, it's a matter of what tools. So when communicating with people verbally, you have different ways you lead them through various situations to find a better version of themselves, or to increase whatever it is they would like to increase, or make better whatever it is they would like to make better. And AI is no different. It is a tool in your toolbox that can help you do those wonderful things you do better, faster, a little bit more efficient. So I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to communicate. Everyone out there has different knowledge, skills, and abilities, or the KSAs as we call them. And I would encourage all of you to look into AI as being the way to really magnify what those things are and to rapidly get to the answers that you're looking for in this world.
Yeah. So we have a large language model that has really caught people's attention, right? I don't want to say caught off guard, because that's not necessarily how I see it, because large language models has been developing since 80s, right? It's just that we don't call it large language model, we just call it something else. And it was processed very slowly, and it grew over time. So the attention that it's receiving right now from the business community is massive, but I wish it was just contained within the business community. It's not. This is not something business only related. This is actually a societal piece that we really have to capture. But I know we're going to jump into talking to Vaughn about her business and her information. But I want to kind of point out, me and Bobby, we used to debrief each other about the Star Trek episodes.
Oh.
About 9-10 years ago, we used to watch the Star Trek shows, and we was like, "Hey man, what do you think about that episode?" And believe it or not, the premise, it had multiple premises in the whole season of that Star Trek, where the most fascinating one was how they did the traveling. Right, the traveling was done through mycelium, which is a fungi from the earth, and mycelium will stream through your blood, and then you'll travel because of mycelium. But the unknown piece that was already described based on large language model was this bag of knowledge, right? And the bag of knowledge was hardware agnostic. Didn't matter what hardware it was, didn't matter what software it was, didn't matter who was using it. So it was a bag of knowledge that if the wrong person gets their hands on, it will turn the whole universe into something else. So guess how you hide that bag of knowledge? You do time travel. You travel throughout the pockets of time to keep that bag of knowledge away from the bad guys. And there's only a sole caregiver of that knowledge. I don't want to ruin the whole thing. There's a whole lot of things going on in Star Trek. But if you want to kind of say, where have I seen large language model before? Well, the first thing I think of is Star Trek season, not last two seasons, but season before that in CBS, right? I think it's only on CBS app. It's not actually on CBS. So I kind of want to set the stage that way, because what we're talking about, this large language model and KM, the knowledge management piece of it, I want to set the stage for the business specific purposes, because when it comes to large language model, you have a spectrum of topics that you can go down in, right? But if you think about it from a knowledge management perspective, it sets a little bit more sense to, okay, what is the actual value of large language model? Because Lucky implied that earlier about safety, onboarding, right? There was this like low-hanging fruit cases. What did you say that? I said low-hanging fruit use cases. And you have these ability to target these as a stepping stone. But once you get to the core, again, remember that Star Trek scenario, the bag of knowledge had to be hidden from the wrong person. And that wrong person doesn't mean from somebody from outside, but also from inside, because that bag of knowledge gives away a whole lot once a person gets a malicious intent. You know, we can talk about cybersecurity here all day long, but it's your knowledge, right? And in this day and age, we can kind of look at it from an IP perspective, right? Intellectual property perspective. It's actually beyond that. This is your business process. This is your customer's information. This is your HIPAA. This is your credit card information. This is all sorts of information that is stored around these large language models, right? And it's sensitive enough to the point that we still don't know how to protect it properly, right? But we don't want to go down the rabbit hole of Star Trek, where somebody has to take ownership of the whole large language model and fly time to time. It's a fascinating season if you're interested in watching Star Trek, because what they're describing is literally what large language model LLM is, and it's just that they represented it as a KM, which is that they're managing this knowledge. So these knowledge is something very destructive, something more powerful, something that can build civilization, something that can also ruin the civilization, right? So when we come back after Bobby and Masako does a intro to Vaughn and talk to Vaughn, we'll take her lead and discuss more of the business use cases. But Vaughn, welcome to our IAI.
Oh, so we lost you again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we lost the voice.
Having a few technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we had a large language model that was sophisticated enough, it will read her lips and will be voicing it out using Michael Jackson's voice or something, or my favorite is always Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel Jackson. No.
So Vaughn, let's try that troubleshooting one more time and see if the audio comes back. I'm so sorry. I apologize. I didn't expect this to happen today. But that's what's happening with large language model, actually, right? It's doing it's able to do ASL signs using large language model, and turn the ASL into real time sign to speech, right? Voice, audio. It's doing real time language translation, right? So a whole lot of things that are happening right now. It's allowed to have all these capabilities because of large language model. But there's a whole other discussion that Bobby can have, which is that if you don't have latency, you're not going to use it, right? You don't want to talk to somebody who doesn't talk back right away, right? And it's like, oh, give me 5 minutes, I'll get back to you. Well, that's how it was back in 1980s, right? In 2025, since ChatGPT has been around, it's gone up through the roof, right? The use cases. So let's try Vaughn one more time. Let's see if Vaughn is. How's the audio? No audio.
No audio. Well,
go ahead, Lucky.
I'll say let's have her try it once more. Let close all her browsers and then we can just talk a little bit as she does that. Vaughn, can you try it once more? Close all your browsers and try to reconnect and I wanted to be able to take a moment and say, a lot of what we do here is, we do try to educate, help people understand what AI could possibly do for them. But before we do that, as Vaughn goes in and out trying to troubleshoot this, I want to take the time to say, hey, thank you to all our military veterans, all the U.S. veterans out there. She's got a lot of time, 33 years doing what she's been doing. Also, she's spent time supporting us through the U.S. Air Force, and we have other people here that have also been in the armed forces. And we want to thank you all for your service. We want to thank you for stepping up and, making a difference in our lives as Americans. I want to thank you all. And so again, thank you all for being veterans, and I just want to take a moment to thank you for your service. We do a lot here on this channel to support veterans, and we're veteran centric. And Asif, Bobby, thank you. And we continue to bring people on that are
Masako as well. Masako is veteran too.
And Masako.
Yeah.
I'm the outlier. I've just supported the government agencies my whole life. But then thank you again for your service. And as we get this corrected, we'll get this worked out. The little technical issues. but we are a veteran centric. At least III supports veterans, and we keep bringing them on because that's our focus. And so as we bring her on and get this troubleshot, we'll get this worked out. But thank you again.
Oh,
Thank you, sir. This is very kind of you.
Thank you. It's interesting with regard to large language models and knowledge models. Being a veteran, right? It's like you learn something new every day, or every station, or whatever you need to, right? We're constantly learning, and I feel like even as civilians, right? We're always in a state of learning, because the moment we stop learning, it's kaput. It's a wrap, right? There's no more breath in our lungs.
right.
So it's our calling as human beings, as parents, as visionaries, as leaders, to continuously learn, to remove the barrier from one's own mind that says, oh, that's hard, or oh, I don't know what that is, I've never seen that before. To show up with, yes, let's see what this is. It's new, but I'm a quick study, and how can I use it to be my next best self? And I feel like that's how each of us need to show up in our lives daily. What is our next best move to live our next best life? And currently AI is that space. How are we leveraging the knowledge that we have in order to live our next best life? And it's no secret to you guys, I'm very passionate about the parent, because the parent has to continuously learn. The parent is a leader in their home. They manage their household. Their children are looking to them on, how to lead. So as a parent, we have to constantly be in a state of open, curious learning, because our children are learning from us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a good area to kind of cover is, okay, we can talk about until we get her back on, or if we have technical difficulties, we can work out a different angle. But one thing to consider is the layman's, as they walk in, people that are looking at AI, they're trying to figure out, how do I make, or how do I add AI and augment myself? How does AI help me develop new ways of reaching out? Or how, if I had an MOS, if I was a tank mechanic, how do I make AI, how do I leverage AI to help me grow? And I was having this conversation today with a few of the people at the office, and there's different ways of looking at AI, but there's a couple of different ways. There's AI, there's open AI, open source, and there's closed source AI. Which model, which one would work better for individuals that are trying to bring out better, or provide information that they have, and be able to feed it out to others. And a lot of the, and you, Bobby, you let me know what you think, but a lot of the closed, open source, closed source, the closed source are more like a black box. If you want to try to feed into it, you don't really know if that data is actually going to be available. So at that point, do you start to look at maybe an open source model and say, I can actually put more into an open source versus a closed source model? And how do I get my services out there? So, we had this discussion. I really believe that going with the typical chat GPTs, or, Groks of the world, are more for individuals that are just trying to figure out or learn. But if you want to build a model after yourself, you want to build a bias in it, and usually that's a bad thing. But in the case of Vaughn, where she has a very specific area that she's trying to improve, I would recommend that she start to look at open source models that she can actually feed into it, from things, that emails or documents she's produced, conversations that she's had with people, and train the model to be more like what she would respond to, as opposed to something that's open source that would just give you, at least the Wikipedia version of, what safety is, as opposed to what she would see safety would be, a personalized touch. So how do you get to that personalized touch?
Well, in that space, I think it's important for everybody to understand that just like in your real current world jobs that you're doing, there is some type of governance, right? What's your authoritative documents? What says or what defines what it is that you do and what's good in that field and what's bad in that field? If you're using the general purpose model and taking in the world, garbage in, garbage out. However, if you are using a sample data or a piece of data or data sets that relates specifically to a specific area of expertise, then that's where the money's at for you, right?
Mhm.
Taking that and then basically consolidating it and pulling out those key things you need to know, whatever they may be, for your business. So if I was a cook I owned the restaurant and I had used the model to find recipes, well, I can get recipes from all over the world, and they may not be quite as tasty as I think. But if I owned a little chicken shack and I had only a few herbs and spices to work with, now I got a formula that I can now go out and have a strategic advantage with, right? So it is all about the data that you're looking at and its relevance to the field of study or the area of interest that you're talking about. So AI, again, in this instance, it aids you as a tool, but it doesn't replace your core knowledge of this is what I want to know, and this is the field I want to know about, and these are the regulations or the policies or the source documents that I need to analyze very quickly compared to my competitors. If you are a person into supply chain, depends on how deep you want to go in the supply chain and where you sit in the supply chain. If you're at the wholesale retail edge, you want to know where all the suppliers located and how long does it take on average to get into your warehouse. You might want to know what the stockages is. If you in the supply chain produce something, whatever it is you produce, if it doesn't require farmers or does it require pre-manufacturing and you do assembly, what is the lead times? How much are you able to contract for at any given period of time? And where do they get their stuff from? So that if there's a natural disaster somewhere, does that affect your business? Knowing that before everyone else and buying up all the stock that's available could be a strategic advantage.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Masako. I see you smiling, Masako.
Well, it just goes back to that language, right? If you understand the language, you can speak the language, and so you know where to go to look and have a conversation. And that's essentially, I feel like, why we're here every other week, having a conversation for whomever is tuning in to understand that you can learn the language.
Yeah.
It is truly simple to learn the language. You just have to have a level of curiosity. It's like, you know what, I want to know that, or how do I do this or that? Like all of the fields, financial fields, the health field, cooking, parenting,
Mhm.
mathematics, whatever your field may be. And then I'm really thinking about what Lucky was asking when he said, like open source versus closed source. As a business owner and someone that's developing something that's unique, and then when it comes to HIPAA laws and you want to make sure you don't have any HIPAA violations. For me, I feel like that I would want a closed source because I'm feeding this language model the data that I'm collecting. And so this will be unique to our organization and will maintain a degree of confidentiality with regard to the people and the unique situations that we serve, versus open source, like the things that you would find on the internet that is not unique to you. The good news is about that is it's like having a dinner party with all of these brains from all over the galaxy throughout history, right? It's over a trillion words, trillions of words within this large language model that you could really become an expert with the things that you are interested in, and then put your own twist on it, because no one is a you. So whatever your secret sauce is, get all of that knowledge that's already been shared throughout the galaxies, throughout our time, and then put your unique twist on it and really become great. on purpose. And so that's what I laugh at, because I'm always
Hmm.
in a state of, okay, what's next? What's next? What am I
Yeah.
doing next? What am I doing next? What's my next move? That's what keeps me up at night. It's like, what am I doing next?
Well, right, you're absolutely right. What there's always a thing when you're a young kid, uh, you hear a rumor and somebody will say, consider the source, right? So the real question is, what is the source of your information? And that quality is essential as far as being able to have a real strategic advantage. The disadvantage of many of the large models are there's so much stuff out there that is not only derivative in nature, a lot of it is incorrect, or a lot of it is outdated, or a lot of it uh, is truly in a state of what we call data violation, which means it is now feeding upon itself, right?
Mm.
Data that creates a result and then feeds upon that result as fact, problematic, right? So the sources that you use need to hold the same standard that they do now. So your subject matter expertise in whatever your field is essential. There is no version a version of life at this point where AI alone can do what you do better without someone validating the data sources, validating the timeliness of the data. So for many of you, you may have heard a term of data being stale or information being stale. It was relevant last week, but what about now? So to get that timely information out, you got to make sure what you took in was timely. Other than that, you're getting a fast, bad answer. So
Yeah. Yeah. You still have to do your due diligence and check the sources. You can't rely on it like it's law. You got to use multiple sources and consider what you're using it for, especially like if you're doing your own thing. These are it's just buckets of knowledge, right?
that's
Yeah, if you can imagine someone that's really good at what they do, like Vaughn, she's really good at safety, okay? And now she has a business, she has multiple employees. Now, there's no way that you could replace a Vaughn, but you could create, and we've talked about this, but this is a different form of digital twin, but you could create a twin of how Vaughn would respond. Because you remember that old thing in high school where they took four people out of the classroom, and then the teacher said, "Okay, I'm gonna give you a scenario, and I want you to tell. We're gonna bring one person in, and we're gonna give them the scenario, and then we're gonna let that person tell one of the other students outside. And by the end of the fourth person, the whatever the scenario is, it's not anything what it originally was. Word of mouth, like train the trainer. Back in the day, it was like, hey, train the trainer, train the trainer. Make sure that we all help each other out. But there's a loss of data there. Okay, there's always going to be a little bit of a loss there between one person and another. But if you have a digital twin, a constant large language model that's taken all your data, that's taken all your emails, that knows who you are, how you would respond to a safety issue, and say, hey, this is how I would respond, and then have that digital twin, and then have all your staff. Now it's more like at that point, it's a hub and spoke. Vaughn is still there providing the true background of who she is and how she has that secret sauce answer for everyone else. And then they're not having to depend on word of mouth or passing on bad information. At that point, Vaughn is there, but not there, because she's able to train a model with her bias, the way she sees the world, and that model interprets it that way also. I think that's the future of decentralized, small, or not small, but large, not large language models, but of course we call them that, but more personalized models that would have a digital Vaughn available for all her staff any time of the day, 2 a.m., 5 a.m., 9 a.m., midnight, whatever the case may be. Vaughn doesn't have to be there because she's trained a model to represent her. I think that's a fantastic way of, at some point, we'll get there. It's right now, the thread is Back in the day, they said, what was the number, Asif? 85% of all AI projects fail for many reasons. But nowadays, things are a little bit easier. I'll be honest with you. With large language models
Fail
like
faster.
Llama, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You fail faster, and
Yeah.
you learn from it, and you just keep getting better at it.
Yeah, but I think the newer large language models enable people like Llama to start to kind of have more success than failures. And we just have to learn how to take advantage of the technology. It's not as scary as it used to be. 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, Bobby and I, we were all talking. It was just, hey, look, okay, how do you develop a large language model, or how do you develop an AI? Well, first is data. What kind of data do you have? How good is the data? Is the data clean? Those were the things. Now with large language models, you have to just train it, and then you start to have something that's proven quicker, and
Yeah.
you get to that point faster than back in the day. So we have improved our technologies. Now we need to have people take advantage of what these offerings are. And so, Vaughn, are you back? Do we have Mike? No. It's okay.
But we also have the chat as well, so we can take comments from the chat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, one of the things that Lucky has been describing, and Bobby, you hit on it. But if you take that food example and you just amplify that, just take that cooking, the chef, people ordering food. If you just look at that process, somebody walks in, gets the food, gets the menu, orders the food is delivered, and then they eat, and then they move on with the life, right? If you just think about that, how many ways can large language model help with that, right? Um, so let's run through a scenario here. The scenario is if you have large language model that does everything in the universe, but now you have an SLM, a small language model, or an expertise, or as John would put it, an agentic AI, right? Um, in between the steps of all things, you have a large language model. So let's do something that we always do in this podcast, which is to talk about the labeling, how labeling goes wrong, and labeling is what disrupts everything. So when you said like 85% fails, well, that's because somebody didn't see through all the operations and how to label things correctly. That's a major deficiency in everything in the project. And then if it comes to especially AI and large language model, labeling matters like unbelievably, right? So when we're talking about, let me open up my private chats here. So when you're talking about something that is as small as a restaurant, how can a small language model, a expert language or MCP or agentic AI, how can they help, right? So if you look at any business process, they all have just three steps. You look for demand signal, you process that demand signal, and you deliver that demand signal. If you deliver, somebody pays you. If you don't find the demand signal, you have no business. You don't process anything. You don't deliver anything. But if you deliver it, that demand signal processed very well, and people pay you for it, and they come back and do it all over again. It creates a feedback loop, right? You don't have to keep looking for demand signal because you already know the demand signal. You're addressing it. You're operationalizing it. So if you look at it from the large language model perspective, and this is important that I tell to everybody, the reason you don't do many things today is because the technology is so limited. But because of large language model, now you have to think, okay, no matter what size business I am, I should be able to do all sorts of things that I haven't previously thought about at all, right? Because small, medium, large enterprise, government, services, whatever you want to call it, they all have these three steps: demand signal processing, and deliver on that demand signal, right? Large language model allows you to expand all sorts of capability within those three steps, right? So if you're looking for marketing to find those demand signals, of course, everybody knows how large language model and AI is so effective on that, right? And then if you have business process, all of a sudden you're looking at your business process and like, well, hold on a second. My competition spends about, let's just pull a number out, like $100 on their operations. Their OpEx is $100. Because of large language model, my large language model enables me to do operations for $80, $50, right? So whatever I do deliver as a demand signal sales, I have, same amount of customers, but I'm taking more home, right? My competition is not really realizing that I'm not cutting anybody. I'm just selling it for the same price. But think about it. Large language model enables you to do more marketing, capture a bigger market segment, and do your operations for less and sell more for lower prices, right? So large language model all of a sudden enables you to do things that previously as a business owner we said like, well, we wouldn't do that because technically that will cost a lot more. And if it costs a lot more, I'm not going to do that, right? So with large language model, and here's another kicker, large language model, people are obsessed with the low code, no code, right? I think that's where every consultant that I talk to or every group that I've been part of, they all are just super excited about this low code, no code, right? They're saying like, okay, large language model, it allows me to do what now? Oh, wow. So I can do low code, no code all day long. Because agentic AI can do that. Agentic AI can write the codes on your behalf all the time and continuously do so. If you think about the large language model, what it can do beyond low code, no code is what I want to get to. This is a knowledge management piece of it, because that does not require you to be so technical with things anymore, right? Because even in low code, no code, you have to kind of get technical with things. Like, well, hold on a second. If I write this code, what do I do next? Like, I have a bunch of codes here. What do I do next, right? And that's the problem with every business, because not everybody in a business is going to be say, I know how to copy and paste it, right? That's not the case with all the businesses. But in all businesses, if you look at it, a large language model that's hitting on that knowledge management piece, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3, right? If you can understand there's a knowledge management, and I talk to Bobby about this all the time, if you have archived records, if you have some sort of record management in your business, if you archive your data somewhere, if you just keep away your 5-year-old data, 10-year-old data, last month's data that you somewhat say, you know what, I just junk it. I kind of just put it there in case IRS calls. Gold mine, right? Gold mine, like literally gold mine of everything that your competition is not doing, everything that not a lot of people are paying attention to. You have a gold mine where you can use a large language model to tap into that repository of data, right? Call it record management. We call it record management government, but archive data mainly, right? Data that you're not using. I mean, if you're a small solopreneur that's using a laptop to run a business, your desktop is filled with archive data and you have no idea whose email address you have in there, whose phone number you might have in there, or just that one sale you did that you never invoiced, right? Big businesses does it all the time. They audit information all the time through the audit process.
So how do they know? How do they know what they have? How do they know what they have if they don't know what they have and they have all of this?
So this is the context piece of it, right? Because a large language model is not necessarily looking for information that you have as far as curiosity in the back of your head. It's looking for information that it can structure. And if it can structure, say, 100% of your data, you're a winner. But if it can structure 98% of the data and 2%, you look at it like, I can fix that myself because I know maybe there isn't something there, but now we're 100% structured, right? So a large language model,
give us an example. I want to break it up for a moment.
Yeah.
I want a real life scenario of someone that's they've been running their business for 15 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. If you look at
hard drive, you know, they have all these documents, their SOPs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? They've
Right.
so moved on from that, right?
Yeah.
They're in their 15th year. So are you saying that give a real world example of how somebody can upgrade their systems, shorten their time on their work day with all of this information that they have gathered throughout the life of their business to duplicate themselves, to create an agent? Give us some real world scenarios with with the 15-year-old business owner.
Mhm.
I'll take 2 steps to
15-year-old solopreneur.
yeah, make it better, right? Some 15-year solopreneurship, and then all of a sudden you have 15 years to go. We'll just play with that scenario, but let's go with a Lucky. I wanna put 2 scenarios, but Lucky, you can go ahead first.
Yeah, no, well, I'll just give you an experience. Okay. I'm getting older. All right. There's things that I want to do, and there's things that I wanted to do, and things that I used to do well. And I don't want to do any of that stuff anymore. And so, I'll give you an example. We'll just say, a doctor's office, has a lot of, and I'm not going to go into any specific field, but I've been working for 15 years. I have a good practice, but I have a certain way that I do things, right? And there's a lot of documents that I have, HIPAA related, that are private. And another concern for me is privacy. I wouldn't want my data to be managed by a closed source uh, uh, AI, because it's a black box. I don't know what's going in and what's going out, or how if it's using RAG to go gather information from the internet and bring it back in, and somehow it's poisoned my data. I would want to have something that I have control over. So then I would want to go with something that's open source. That open source AI, I've trained it now. And so there's things that I don't want to do. Like, say, for example, when somebody comes in and fills out a form, and that form, and then you can have that online now, and then that form feeds into your AI, and then it sends that person messages saying, hey, instead of having to have someone schedule, the person can schedule with the AI specifically, and then that AI arranges that data to say, okay, this person's, according to who they are and their, and previous information, we can now customize how we treat that person. And then I don't have to sit there and tell people, hey, because of this person, the way their mortality, morbidities, we want to have this, we want to follow these guidelines to work with these people. And AI is a good way to start to build that for your practice, specifically for your practice. And then you have privacy. That's something that right now in the US, we don't really focus in a lot on privacy. That says, hey, okay, we're going to protect your data, and if something happens, we're going to send in the National Guard, or we're going to send in we're going to there's no arm that says, hey, so you have to take the onus on your own. Say, how do I protect my data? Well, going with the black box is not the way to go. You want to be able to look and say, okay, I'm going to take ownership of it. So how do I do that? And then how do I create a repeatable process and something that someone else can use, and I don't have to be there. I don't have to always be there. That's the thing. Is I'll give an example. Would be, you want to do better things with your time.
Mhm.
And how do you free yourself from that? Is to start to develop a model that's specific to you. And I know that's hard to do right now, because it seems like AI is this weird mathematical statistical thing that's I wouldn't be able to ever understand. But you can start to build slow. And I think that you have to learn. And so um, leveraging open AI I think is a key. I don't see, I don't see myself going down. If I'm a small business, I
Mhm.
don't have the resources. So one thing is closed AI. They use these big servers in the cloud, and you have a lot of silicon, a lot of processing to be able to manage that solution. Where if you had something that was open source, you can install it on a small mini PC. As long as you got 100 gigs, maybe 200 gigs worth of hard drive space, you can develop your own language model, and you don't have to make that huge investment, because everything's open source. It's free. And so free it sounds really good to the business, the business owner.
Mhm.
Those are tangible things that you can grab onto. If it's free, it's for me, right? I can take and make something. It may be a learning curve, but it's not that big of a jump. And
So
so then,
what is the I don't know if anybody ever wants to be called average. with regard to training the model, right? Open source model, training the model to free your time up. How time wise, how long does something like that take on average? If you're working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 4 to 5 days a week, on average, how long would it take the consultant or whomever to train a model in order to duplicate themselves so they can get outside? Because for me, honestly, guys, sometimes, I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, girl, I am so in love with you. I want to go outside.
Yeah.
I want to go play. I want to go outside and play. So what is the average?
Well, the thing is, there's the fact that you can buy for many industries, for many things, you can buy a tool already that does what you need it to do, right? So when I first came in the military, very young, I was 17 years old. And back then, the Officers Club and NCO Club was run by military people, like literally. It wasn't MW, it was military people. Well, as a logistician, just like you do count all the 10% of the equipment and you count all of the weapons, we used to have to go to the club to inventory the liquor. So the way we would inventory the liquor would be by bottle, by weight, and we would do the formula versus the sales, and then decide it's a certain percentage left or right that you can account for, that you can get away with not having. And then at a certain point, they'd be like, somebody's stealing. Well, time moves forward, and now you have you move forward, and you had software, and then software that bartender puts in specifically what the drink is that they're making. And then based upon that calculation, when you go ahead and measure the bottles, then you can get a tighter group. Well, nowadays, AI can look at what's coming in, what's going out, and basically a phone with LiDAR can go and just scan the bottles. You're just taking a picture and it's scanning the bottles. And because it got LiDAR, it knows what bottle, what it should be. And based upon where the liquid is, now we've moved from losing this much money and it's okay, this much money and say it's okay, to the point that we could tell pretty much within a few drinks how much we've lost. And then the AI can look at who was on shift based upon the camera and the shift logs and tell you Tommy's stealing. Either he has a heavy hand or Tommy's taking the cash and not putting it in the till, and you don't know. So AI, those tools are integrated into the things we do now. As AI begins to evolve, we won't be calling it AI anymore. It'll just be ubiquitous and embedded in things, right? One point, the antivirus you had, there was a antivirus, there was a malware, there was and all of those things became one. Your cell phone is an amalgamation of a whole bunch of things. And then y'all got a digital camera at home. Have you bought a digital camera lately? Oh, it's in your phone, right? When's the last time you bought a new alarm clock? Oh, it's in your phone. Well, AI is going to be the same way. And so what you're looking for is not always just using open or closed source models, but looking for a tool that manages your business with the AI smarts that you need for your business built in. So look at the entirety of where we're at now and what tools and products have that functionality built in for you, because the average person maybe isn't trying to learn fully models, but they need to understand how models work and understand how knowledge management works and how analysis works, so they can look at the tools that they're buying and say, well, this worked for my business.
Yeah, the reason I named it KM and LLM is because LLM is not even that known. Like if you walk around the street and you say like, yeah, what do you know about LLM? You ask about ChatGPT, everybody knows about ChatGPT.
Mhm.
They heard it on TV, they saw Microsoft Copilot or something along the line. What you see is a lot of AI tools, but what you don't see is the data processing, right? How do you process that AI to feed those AI tools? Down here is all data. This is data processing, and this is all the data use case. And data use cases is what I call AI is, right? This data has to be processed in a certain fashion, right? Certain style. So when Bobby just described that, like if you put that in your house, like as a solopreneur, you're working in your home, what you would like to do is maximize more time with your family and minimize time in your business. Well, you have to think about it as a strategy, right? You have to organize all your devices. You have to think through and say, how do I minimize this devices that's in front of me, and how long is it going to take me? How can I use all these devices as it is and make that part of my strategy? So that way, a large language model that can talk to anybody in the world is none of your tools necessary, right? What the tool that you need is the one that talks to all of your other devices. Like what Bobby just described, that phone knows what alcohol content is, but that phone doesn't know what the sale was from yesterday. It's going somewhere else. It's looking at the POS system, says point of sale system, to say, hey, how much was the sales again? Or hold on, somebody's going to process that data and figure out the delta between alcohol and money missing, or money missing and alcohol is too much, right? Whatever the case is.
Yeah.
So the data is processed somewhere, and when it's processed, I think going back to Lucky's example, you need privacy. You want to process data, but if you process that data in Ohio and you live in California, your privacy is not really there because somebody else in Ohio has those data. They process it for you and then feeds it to you in California, right? And I'm not making this up. It's literally what's happening because your data centers are probably in Virginia and you're using it somewhere in Florida. And if it's somewhere in Texas, doesn't mean you are in Texas and data is being processed in Texas. No, it could be still processed in Virginia, depending on the device that you're interacting with. So,
it sounds to me like it goes back to you need to know what questions to ask.
a strategy and the question is what brings the strategy together. Because if you look at it from your house perspective, for your kids' safety, for your safety at home, your Ring doorbell, that's not something you can control. But can you take the information from the Ring doorbell and have a large language model that you install yourself? And again, I want to go back to the time frame you mentioned. To install, we were actually going to do a live demo today. Me and Bobby talked about it, but a live demo might be just something that it's not about how fast you can do it. It's about how many troubleshootings are you going to have to do that me and you can teach about large language model downloading all day long. It's not downloading. It's about using it and how many troubleshootings you fall into, right? How to overcome this troubleshooting really, really fast. So when it comes to downloading, it's really fast. But how many hours are you going to spend in troubleshooting is what you have to strategize for. The good question here is, I know how to download a large language model, but do I know how to troubleshoot it, right? Because troubleshooting is what we have been researching for the last 3 or 4 years at this point, because that's what wastes a lot of time in AI project. And Lucky mentioned this, 83% of the AI project don't really go anywhere, right? But it's okay. If you have a strategy and you ask the right question, you're not looking for an answer. You're just looking for a better question, right? Strategy is better questions. So let me go back to the house example about kid safety. You got your Ring cameras, you got your Apple devices, you got your Samsung devices, Androids, whatever the TV devices you have, they're all interacting somewhere in your house. They're all processing data through your wires that leaves your house, right? That's the pipeline, sort of like a water pipe. How does the water come in and how does the water leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you have the data that's all around your house, you're not going to tap into all of them, are you? Right? Like you're not going to do that. You're going to have to do it one by one, like step by step, and say, all right, look, if that Ring doorbell camera is something that's important, how do I secure some things that interacts with that Ring doorbell cameras? Because when we did that, we were just like, oh my God, this is just out in the open. Anybody can just tap into this part of your house and get everything from you, right? So large language model doesn't necessarily mean that, oh my, but because your safety, security, and privacy, I think, Lucky was alluding to earlier, it doesn't necessarily feel bad today. It just stacks up over time. And all of a sudden you realize you have no control over those data. Those data belongs to somebody else, and you have no control over where those data are and how you can frame those data so that way you can utilize those data, right? And with large language model, it's no different, right? A doctor's office that says, 15 years in business, I just stack data wherever. I can pull them together. Yeah, but with large language model, it can do it. But here's the problem with large language model. If you have them all in a paper, you haven't digitized it, what good is it going to do for you? Right? You have all sorts of archived data. You have record management that's in your closet, the stacks of paper, right? So strategy, right? You don't have to go through a Ring doorbell camera or go through your closet. Start with a strategy, a map out of say like, if I develop a large language model, I should do easy steps first, see how that works, see how that feedback works. So that way I do some things and I go outside and go for a walk, right? Like you said, I want to spend time with myself, right? I don't want large language model to just kill me.
Yeah.
I already killed myself enough with the laptop in front of me all day long. Now I
Yeah.
have large language model. I don't even go to sleep anymore.
Well, and that goes to the whole point of anything in life. What are you doing it for, right? So, with any tool, to include all of the AI tools that are now available, if you get information fast and accurately, what are you doing with it? Once I get this information, how do I turn that information into money? These are the questions you really got to ask yourself. Yeah, this is wonderful information, to which you do nothing with. Years ago, there was a series of books. First, there was Built to Last, which was a great book, talked about companies that have lasted X number of years. And then they would have these conferences. And one day, someone went to the conference and says, yeah, when the audience goes, yeah, but so what? I don't know how to do this. So then the same PhD team went back and built a book called Good to Great. And the thing about Good to Great is it talks about how businesses, great businesses, took advantage of the information at hand, right? How Kmart got beat because they had the reports, the big analysis to say what they need to do, but they didn't. How did Kroger become number one? Is because in the surveys that they give customers, it says, I don't want to go to the baker and the butcher and the shopping mart. I want it all together. Everybody else in the industry had that information, but Kroger's the one who did something about it and started to build their Krogers as such. And that's how they had the advantage. So for any of us out there, the question is, when I get this information, what am I going to do that will then earn me revenue? If the answer is I don't know, then maybe you're wasting money.
Yeah.
Well said.
Word.
Yeah, that's pretty much the 1, 2, 3 of where large language model you're going to get from, and then at 3, what are you going to do with it, right? Is it even worth it to go to the number 2 steps to figure out what are you going to do with it, right? Because if you think about it, majority of the stuff that I have on my desktop, it's probably not worth for me to search, right? So is there an alternative? Yes. So one of the things that I do is I go to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, like, write me a script for my computer specifically and tell me how to do it in my computer. Should I be downloading a large language model just to do what I just did with ChatGPT and it took me 2 minutes to do? Because when I did that ChatGPT gave me the code, I copied and pasted it in the computer just like ChatGPT told me to, and it ran it. It took like 8 hours. I went to sleep, woke up fresh, looked at the computer, and I was like, "There's a new file here." Guess what it had? All the things that I asked for it. It probably didn't capture all of them because 8,000 of them was in there, right? I'm sure I'm not going to be so sad that I missed a few 100,000 or whatever. I saw 8,000 that I couldn't have done myself, right? 8,000 pretty much in a gold mine, right? I found a lot of information that I was looking for. So it goes back, it shows that some things business did not want to do for decades and years because of how cost prohibitive it was, how technology didn't really exist. But now we all been wanting this for so long. Now it's here. And it's called large language model. Tomorrow it might not even be called large language model. It would just sound like Microsoft. It has everything in it, right? Somebody's going to label it and then say, I have everything, right? So you might hear large language model in other ways like NLP, which is natural language processing. And if you hear this other thing that nobody really uses anymore, NLU, which is natural language understanding. But if you look at NLP, that describes large language model very easily. If you can process that information in your head, you can do it in the computer. If you have a language in your head, you have a language in your computer, and that language is great. in your computer because you can talk to it now. So instead of thinking about logic, like how to write code, if this, then, right? You're just saying, do whatever I ask you to do. If you don't understand it, tell me you didn't understand it, right? Or save me some time, say, I don't even know what you said, but try it this way. Because I do that with ChatGPT sometimes. I don't ask ChatGPT a question. I said, like, what question should I ask you based on what I'm trying to do? It gives me a prompt. I copy and paste that into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT does its thing, right? So NLP, NLUs, large language model, this might not be a thing for you in the future. You're gonna say everything is AI, everything is a laptop, everything is a speaker, whatever it is. It's just mislabeled everywhere.
Yeah.
that's the case of marketing, right? Everybody mislabels everything for themselves. But one thing you're going to have for sure is that knowledge piece, the knowledge management piece, and this is where I want to probably get into at this point, is because this is the bread and butter that we all need to understand about knowledge management. It's your business continuity, it's your succession, and to go back to your questions earlier, how much time should I spend? This is my number two. If you have a 15-year-old business and you're going to be in 15 and you're going to be in the business for the next 15 years, you need succession, you need exit strategy, you need a business continuity, and they all rely on knowledge. And if you cannot package those knowledge correctly using a large language model that is, well, I guess there's many ways to terminize, but this is probably a family friendly show. I have to probably say something along the line of you have to be the owner of this KM, right? You literally have to own it. You have to protect it like that lady in Star Trek. She's been protecting it. Bobby, what was her name? Kiki?
Oh,
No?
Michael Burnham. That's right, Captain Burnham.
Captain Byrne. Oh my goodness. She went through so much trouble in her life just to protect that knowledge. You got to protect that knowledge because you want to pass it on to the next guy who's going to buy your business or be your son or daughter that's going to, do the succession of your business. So large language model, it will disappear. But KM's been here for so long. We've struggled with it so much, but now it's transforming because of large language model. You can onboard somebody because of KM that's running a large language model. You onboard this person today. Next time you onboard somebody, you're going to onboard that person in a few seconds shorter than the first person, or a few hours shorter. Because when Bobby was talking about military, I was thinking about, like, my goodness, to onboard us, it took them 6 weeks to put us to a boot camp. They could have put us through hell for 6 weeks, and we would have had all the knowledge done in day one, right? They didn't have to put us through classrooms anymore. They could have just run us to the Bertha and then just kill us all, right? Physically, we would have been just all fine because, that's what you're supposed to do in the military, right? But we spent so much time in the classroom just learning about things that we should have been able to do on demand, just in time. I shouldn't have to learn all the ranks in the military. I should just look at it whenever I feel like it, right? Whenever I need it, I can ask for that information. So onboarding, that's primary example that I always use for businesses that can afford it. But if you're a small business and you're thinking to yourself like, oh, well, I don't do onboarding. I don't need onboarding training. And then Lucky mentioned safety. Well, if you're a small business and you don't have to worry about OSHA coming and inspecting you, maybe you don't need it. But guess what every business requires? Somebody to look at the invoice. Somebody look at the invoice and say, I can audit this in real time without having human eyes on it. So when you talk about account receivable, account payable, AR, AP, your auditing of your invoice, money that's going in, money that's coming in, can you have a system look at it? A large language model can do that, just the way Bobby mentioned it, through a phone, right? A phone can do all this tracking for you, but you have to have a strategy behind that large language model to do those things for you. And you have to make sure whatever that it's doing enough to say, well, it's either saving me money or it's making me
saving me time or saving me money.
Yeah, exactly. So it has to do something greater than this large language model, and that's if you frame it. I had a conversation with John actually earlier about this in the morning. I said if you just look at it from the knowledge management perspective, everything falls into line. 15 years ago, you had a bad start in your business. Today, you can start all over again. Use your SOP that you're going to sell 15 years from now. That large language model will help you develop a business intelligence no matter what size your business is today.
Yeah.
If you have good business intelligence, guess what's going to happen to your business? you are going to be you're going to be better evaluated than your competitors. Because a bank can walk in and say, how do I know you're evaluating yourself as 3 million? Oh, show me that Excel sheet that has good large language model built into it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
So you
right.
can imagine all sorts of use cases that comes up, and I'll give it to Bobby now. Maybe he can jump in as well.
I mean, I not only do I agree with you, and it goes back to Masako's question about knowing what's uniquely you, making something special, making something yours. So you have your core business, those things that you do in your business that keep the business running. You're buying, you're purchasing, your production, whether you're making lawnmowers or you're making bread, it's all production, right? Those things, artificial intelligence can definitely help you with to optimize them. Another place that could help you if you've had this business for 15 years and you say, I want to make this business uh, books in a state that if I were to sell it, I'd get top dollar. Well, to do that, you would have to either hire a CPA to redo your books and realign things, or have a tool, your accounting tool that uses the international accounting standards, where it does 3-point verification and et cetera, these things that banks know that when they're looking at your general ledger, this number is what it says it is. The other piece to that isn't necessarily something you can do with artificial intelligence is what makes you unique and special. There's a lot of people out there selling lawnmowers, a lot of people out there selling bread. What about your bread is special? What's the experience when I come into the restaurant, right? So you can use artificial intelligence to help create surveys and analyze the surveys to see what customers like or don't like so much and make improvements. There again, building business value in your business. So a 15-year-old business can absolutely be made better by artificial intelligence, by breaking down the things that you do and the things that aren't quantifiable, but yet makes your stuff unique and special. So you got the high tech stuff where it does the deep dive analysis, and the low tech stuff. Why don't they look like my other store on the other side of town? Well, it's painted pink, and pink is a color that people either like or they hate. So why not choose another color that's warm and inviting? Ask artificial intelligence, what are those colors? It'll tell you. Of those colors, what do they tend to communicate to people? You'll get those answers. So again, it's leveraging the right tool at the right time to enhance your overall business. I wouldn't go one shot and try to fix it all. Just like with anything else, it took you 15 years to build that business. Take your time and use the correct tool, building from the bottom up. Make sure your financials are good and build upon that. And I think artificial intelligence, knowledge management, all of those things come together to really enhance your bottom line.
Well said.
I guess we had a guest that we really had in mind, and we're gonna have to bring her back.
Absolutely.
The microphone comes back on. But she mentioned something that there's a dire need to duplicate information for staff. I think Bobby just described how you personalize it to your business. How do you personalize it to your employees? How do you personalize it so there's a good retention? How do you onboard somebody who doesn't even speak the language of your community? Can you have large language model that helps you with that? It's not your large language model, maybe. We don't have to build one from the scratch, but you can use large language model because I think I kind of want to talk about the large language model and how it works, right? Because I think talked a lot about why of large language model, how of large language model, but what is large language model, right? Just to give you a reference, Google 10 years ago or so, when they rolled out, well, they had this Google Translator for a long time, but these things over time grows with the practice, with human validations, right? So let's say, for example, Google Translator specifically, when it first came out, what it used to do is it will say, you're a German person who's trying to learn or understand Mandarin, Chinese Mandarin. So Google will have to go through a process of take that German language, turn it into English, turn English into Mandarin, and then go back and tell the German guy what he needs to know based on German to Mandarin, Mandarin to German, right? Dutch language. Or what's the German language? Not Dutch, right? German is, let's just stick to German. Sorry about that.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch? It says German.
They don't call it German language, of course. There's Mandarin or something like that, right? Like a Deutsch language. So, anyways, but over time, because of its proficiencies, because we were able to edit it further, it went from German to Mandarin straight. It didn't have to go through English, right? But guess what happened? The latency came running, right? It was like, what? Now it's almost like zero latency. It works in real time. So 10 years ago, when we said 10 years ago, they were using large language model in a different form. So it wasn't based on these GPT things that we call it. It was based on just sequencing, right? And there's a reason why I'm going down this rabbit hole is because I want you to understand something that happens in your brain, right? Your brain does the same thing. It's just that when AI does it, you think, oh my God, it's totally out of control. No, it's not. It's just like your brain. Your brain uses sequencing in order to understand pattern. And when it can understand pattern over and over, it does this thing called most confidence and highly accurate. It's full of errors, and errors are part of the future. There's no getting away from errors in AI. Errors is literally what AI is. It's just that you see a most confident and highly accurate version of AI or the large language model. So again, going back to that transformer situation or the translation situation, these languages that are being translated in 2025 is far superior than it was 10 years ago. So when you think about like, oh, I'm a small business, I have few employees, I don't really need that. You don't need it today, but you need to have it matured by the time you need it. And this is something that kind of raises those questions in your head, like, wait a second, what am I missing here? What else do I need to know? Well, here comes the part about your brain. All right. Your brain lives off of this thing called space and time. Okay. And this is important for large language model because this is how you know what large language model is not good at, right? Because what you're good at is what large language model is not good at. Your human brain is formed based on this concept of space and time. So as a brain that has 86 billion neurons starts off with like 2 million neurons. So as a child, you're raising about 25 millions a day in neurons, connections of neurons, and your capability of growing over time slows down. But as a child, you start with 22 million, and then it grows like 25 million a day. So what's happening is that you're realizing this concept of space, right? Concept of space because you can put your feet down or touch things, feel the space. And if you see the space, all of a sudden you realize like, okay, there's a time concept as well. Because last time I put my finger in my mouth, now I know it's been a few seconds because things have dried down. I'm catching up to a time, right? That's what a child does. So space and time, developing that time means you're developing sequences. And if you can develop sequences, you start finding patterns, right? So there you go. There's your sequence and patterns right there. And why is it important? Well, it's important in a fashion that if you think about large language model, where large language model is not good at is in space and time. It doesn't, in its ontology of way of its being, the large language model's being, it doesn't have a space-time concept. What it has is a lot of sequences, a lot of pattern, because that's how it started. It started with sequences. So what we taught it, well, the humans, we taught it that there's a sequence of words. If you put those words together, they don't make sense. Yeah. But if you keep putting those words together a bunch of times, and I think somebody mentioned earlier about billions versus trillion, a human brain will process about 1 billion words in its lifetime. Well, since the inception of AI just a few years ago, it's processed about 1 trillion words. So billion, trillions, you can do the math. Already at this point, it has calculated 1 trillion words in shuffled manner, right? So it took the sequences of saying, well, if I put those words together, they don't make any sense. But if I put those words together like this, human seems to be okay with it. Let's go with that next time as well. you see where I'm going with this? It's a lot of sequences that's looking for patterns of what will be the most correct answer for everybody, and what's the most likely answer that Masako might like, right? Space and time, it doesn't do good, but it does really well with sequence and patterns. And that's what human brain does. It starts with space and time, develops sequence and patterns, but large language model is flipping it on the other side. It's developing patterns, sequences, and then learning about time and space, which is okay because it's a slow process. It will learn that eventually. And when it does, we will have a hell of a show, I would say, on what's going to happen to our interactions with AI, right? Because its understanding of space and time means something that we cannot even fathom what an AI would be capable of doing at that time, right? We can talk about humanoid robots and how LLM develops these humanoid robots and does amazing things for humanoid robots that we probably weren't able to develop 12 months ago, but today we can develop it every day because of large language models. And then that goes back to Lucky's digital twin as well. Those capabilities are insanely fast. So I started off with 2016, where Google Translator was space and time, and then sequences and patterns. What holds for the next 10 years is, how do we minimize these data? How do we compress them? How do we process this data in a compressed manner so that way we can launch it anywhere? Launch it in each IoT devices. Launch it into right now. Me and Bobby talked about it before the show. We have to download it, right? And then we have to show it here how we are downloading it and how fast it was to download, right? That size is going to shrink. That size is shrinking rapidly. As of 2 months ago, if you remember the Wall Street crash that happened where they lost 500 billion back in January, 600 billion over an afternoon, it was because of large language model that was too small. Everybody said, "Oh my God, there goes the earth and sky. Everything's falling apart," right? Well, nothing fell apart. It's just that we realized, like, well, there's other ways to do things, right?
Right.
And we can do it faster, and we can do it for cheaper. So 100 million versus $5 million, huge difference. What does the 5 million have to do? Well, that 5 million feeds into a small business or growing business or medium-sized businesses to adopt artificial intelligence, adopt it for a very cheap cost, right? Lucky talked about open source and closed source. But again, it learns exponentially, not incrementally. So if you're thinking like, well, I will get started when it matures. Well, it matured for somebody else. That's not your baby. That's a mature baby that somebody else raised, right? If you don't have one, that means you don't have a baby. You have to be happy with somebody else's baby, right? So closed and open source, there's a huge conversation to have. But if you split apart all these large language model and all these topics away, what we're discussing here is that, how does this knowledge base stack up, right? What's in that knowledge base? What's in the core of this knowledge base? If it doesn't have, say, for example, a space and time concept yet, that's okay. Will it learn it? Yes, it will learn it. But will it learn for your business is a whole different question than will it learn for Google, right? Because Google can hand it over to you. And I call it the 80-20 rules. Google can give you 80% of everything you need, but you have 20% that is your responsibility to sort of say, now that Google has given me their baby, I'm going to have to make this baby my baby. Right? I have to make
Sounds to me like you're saying, or this is what each individual business owner should be doing. It's relationship building with your model. Spend time in it daily, because if you don't spend time in your relationship model building,
very accurate.
then it's not yours.
All right. Well, that's the same thing in the circle. You talk about motherhood so much, and I think about you often when it comes to artificial intelligence, because you're growing a intelligence, be it artificial or not, right? So many things at different ages we take in. So by the time you're an adult, when you make a decision, there's so many things that you just take for granted because you were shown, your mother showed you as you were coming up, right? You don't even think about it. It just is. It's part of who you are. But the truth of the matter is, we move through time and space pretty much on a guess, meaning you take a step you've taken in information, you've seen the environment around you, but you're not looking at your feet. You know what your stride is and how often that stride has worked for you. I can send you down the sidewalk and raise one square extra inch and a half, and now you're on the ground because you tripped over because there was some information that you missed, right? So just know that just as we're always learning, the AI itself is always learning. It's only as good as the information that it has at that moment. When we take a step, there aren't sensors in our feet saying how close we are to the sidewalk, right? So just think of that as you develop your own solutions, that you will always be part of validating, is it what you wanted it to be? No matter what the solution is, don't just take it for granted. Question it. And not only question it, you can make the artificial intelligence engine that you choose question itself. Go back and validate yourself. Challenge. Give me 10 questions that will challenge this result. And they'll give you 10 questions. Then you say, okay, based upon the last 10 questions, ask yourself those 10 questions and give me a answer.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Bobby. Even when it comes to other founders, when they, they want to know, the data from our organization. And I'm like, instead of me giving you the data from our organization, let me show you how to get your own. Because when you start working in it yourself, then you could develop your own storyline. So when you go back to ask those questions, you've now built it and it can respond uniquely to you and your organization. So I always tell them, I was like, you don't want my data. Let me teach you how to find your own data and develop your own data so it's unique
Right.
to you and your mission.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. How to develop your own. So that kind of addresses the key point of all of this is for those people who are entrepreneurs or those people who are working in business, how do you make the data your own?
Lucky.
Well, I agree with you guys, completely. And I just I was reminiscing. Do you guys remember the first AI that seemed like it was one amazing, right? And they just blew you out of your socks. And I remember the first one you remember, was it IBM Watson?
Yep.
Mhm.
Watson X now. Yeah.
And Watson came, was it like in 2000 or early 2000s or something like that?
2014-ish. Well, a
Was
little
it?
before 2014.
I,
Yeah.
I remember it being. I remember it being so much sooner because I remember just the fact that I like to play chess, and would you say checkers, chess, what have you? And it just amazed me that okay, that there was something that an AI, and we didn't call it AI, it was just Watson, you know, was defeating the best chess players in the world. And it's just like, okay, now the computers are definitely smarter than us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just remember, but it was trained on very specific area. It was trained to play chess. That was its vector sequence. It knew that it had only so many, squares on a table, and it had so many moves, but it was trained on that data specifically, and that was his specialty. You couldn't at the end there was only so many more moves that you could make, and then the human mind only could not keep up with that. So at the end, it was one of those special moments where in life you start to realize, okay, there is something in this that we can now take advantage of or use that'll make smarter decisions than us. Even the smartest people in chess couldn't defeat it. So we know at some point we could train this to do other things better than us. And that was one of the beginnings for me, at least. There was statistical models, BI that turned into ML, but the first one that I remember was Watson, and that was a very specific model.
Right. Yeah.
And,
Yeah. It was a very specific model. But and that's when they demonstrated something, because now you had more capacity and simpler things. When I was 16 in high school, I worked for a company in the real computer room. And back then, the jobs I had was stuff like when they would run checks or handwritten things. We had a machine that would read them, scan them through, and then it would do maybe 30 or 40, and then it'll stop. And whatever it couldn't figure out, it'll put it on the screen, and I'd be like, that is a A, right? And, and then it'll do like 100, and it'll stop again. So,
Nice.
yeah. And it was easy money until they bought a module that then would then see what I was typing and then remap it so that eventually it would run hundreds and hundreds before I had to say that is a W, right? So over time, as these things evolve, and they will continue to evolve, I think that we'll be less amazed, and we need to really pay attention for good and bad. Good, what's good for our company, and bad as far as how are companies using this against us, or in ways that we may not be comfortable with, or with your kids' toys. Are they tracking how your kids play with the toys? And, just things that maybe are not truly evil in nature, but I bought a toy from you for my kid. I didn't buy this toy to give you data on my kid. You know what I mean? So it's just always educating yourself.
You were actually the first human in the loop.
Yeah, I really was. This finger right here, this is the one that did it.
This is the magic finger.
I mean, what we're describing here is perfect segue into what needs to happen next, right? We not only don't have to become aware, we have to get involved. And I'm going to exactly use the terminology that we just used right now, HITL, human in the loop. How is that important? Your ChatGPT experience 2 years ago was so bad. How bad was it? It was so amazing up until you realized the next one is even better. And the reason it got next time better and better and better, today, I can create a single image that has perfect spelling, all 5 fingers, eyes that matches, and looks real, right? How did that happen? It happened through this process of what Bobby just described. It's just that they did it with hundreds of thousands of people. The human Turks behind artificial intelligence, right? Human in the loop. And the terminology here that they use to improve that training is RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback. Guess what happens when you are not aware that feedback is so important for AI to learn something that is customized and needed for your business, right? So human in the loop, oh yeah, we can talk about it from ethics and moral background and blah, 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 because a lot of people do. They bring it up, right? They talk about it from that perspective, but it's not just for that. It's literally to build your AI's need to understand. And this is where a lot of people will understand actual AI, is because the reason AI has existed for so long is because of this thing called weights and bias. Or in another word, dials and knobs. You take this dial, you tone it down, you take this dial and bring it up a little bit more, all of a sudden the output starts making all sorts of different responses. You take this dial and you put this knobs, all of a sudden output just says, all right, I get it. You want me to do it again? All right, dials and knobs, do it again. And then system comes back with right answer. So this human in the loop is not just about, somebody to keep in check on it, but it's just that important. So I will use another example of Tesla. Like, that has nothing to do with large language model, but when the car is driving, and my favorite picture that I always use is Tesla was driving behind a bunch of red lights and green lights and yellow lights, the traffic lights, right? The reason it was driving behind it is because the truck in front of it had a bunch of these traffic lights on the back of the truck. So the Tesla car is looking at it like, what am I supposed to do now?
Right. Exactly.
There's no lights in it, but I can see it, but I don't understand what that is. Well, Tesla actually has a human feedback that goes into a system says, hey, there's a truck in front of me with a bunch of red lights and green lights and yellow lights. What am I supposed to do? Somebody has to say, like Bobby, don't worry about it. It's a truck that's moving in front of you, right? The system has to learn all these different things because, like, say, for example, bike on the side of the highway is a bike on the side of the highway. Bike on a rack driving 80 miles an hour is not a bike that's driving 80 miles an hour. It's a bike on a rack on the back of a car, right? Systems had to understand that. So remember the space and time concept, it visualizes, it sees things, which is computer vision. And the reason I bring that up is because these computer vision using large language model are far more sophisticated than they were before. And this is something very important for any business owner to understand that, they say, I'm not going to use large language model. You're not going to use large language model until the day you realize all the other AIs that you're using are pretty much useless without large language model.
All right.
So say, for example, what Lucky just mentioned earlier and Bobby just mentioned earlier, that these systems are looking at patterns, but they couldn't describe the patterns. What's the problem here? They don't have a large language model to describe why they picked that pattern. The Tesla cars are really good at objectifying, looking at objects, the 3D object, and saying that object is this. Is this as in I make a decision, but I don't tell you what it is. I don't have a large language model to tell you what that decision is. So a business person who's looking at large language model from ChatGPT perspective now has a broader view of what it is that large language model do to all the other AIs that's been here already. And the AIs that are coming into the future, like humanoid robots, factory robots, digital twins, so many other things. Large language model exponentially grows the capabilities for all these things that previously, like Bobby said, if you press W over and over, that slows down the process, right? USPS has been looking at the postcards or the envelopes and reading addresses, handwriting, since 1990. Well, that's great, but there's no large language model to actually read out what's been said. It's just looking at alphabet and alphabet and alphabet and saying that's what the alphabet says. But it doesn't have a large language model to understand it from a business perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So today, USPS using large language model is a lot more better than back in 1990s when it was using AI called OCRs, right? Or somewhat of AI component called OCRs. So these pattern recognition capabilities and large language model built in is deadly combination, because what it's doing is that now it's able to describe things, right? So if you ever come to a lengthier discussions about AI, one of the things that you will hear me say over and over is the fact that it's identifying, labeling, and making decisions. If you can identify, you probably can make labeling. And if you label, you make decisions. If you don't label, you just identified and you stopped. There's no going into decisions anymore, right? So a system, no matter how old it is, it always has done just this. And it will do it for as long as the system exists. It will always have this human thing called what we do: identify, label, and make decisions. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're a business owner and you're thinking like, wait a second, we're just talking about large language model in KM, and this guy's talking about pattern recognition. Well, it's important because you already have lots of pattern recognitions around you. It becomes part of your strategy to look at those pattern recognitions and say, what part of this pattern recognition can I put a large language model into and actually, like Bobby said, make some money off of it, right? It's worth to add to my revenue. If you can identify it and if you can label it, you can make a decision on it. Human intelligence, AI, if you can identify it and if you can label it, you can make decisions on it. Human brain does this thing called, which is evolutionary, we've been doing it for millions of years, is that we've identified, we labeled, and we made decisions for so long. We created a memory base, which is the DNA, right? That's where all the memory goes to live. Because you make so many decisions, you become very good at predicting. Your predictability score goes up higher and higher. It's like Bobby said earlier, you put your foot in front of your left, in front of your right, left and right, left and right. That's how you walk. You don't do frog jumps. You don't do left and right both at the same time. You figured out that left and right is the way to go. Decisions that you made has a consequences of you're predicting the next decision you're going to make. If you keep making the same decisions over and over, your productivity is going to say, just keep making that next decision. It doesn't matter. Because what happened is that you continuously identified, but you never corrected your labeling mechanism. Identify, label, and make decisions. So human intelligence, AI system, large language model, pattern recognitions, they're all based on just this. If you can feed it the right data to identify the right data, and if you can label it because you've trained it, you've matured it, it now can make those decisions for you, but not on day one. It has to make those decisions for a continuous amount of time until it becomes really good at predicting what's coming next. And that's the latency part of it. It becomes super fast after a while, right? That's what human brain does. I've been walking faster after I learned how to walk because I've been labeling it as a walking, not crawling. Windows and doors. I walk through the doors, not through the windows, right? You see, labeling matters, right? So what excites me about large language model is this piece right here that we're discussing right now. It's the dials and knobs. It's that weight and bias. If you can dissect these information, now you open up a whole possibility of, am I a startup? Am I going to create a new product? Maybe. Am I going to improve my OpEx? Maybe. Am I going to do some CapEx? Maybe. If I have a 15-year-old business, maybe I should sell it tomorrow and start a new business. Because now my business intelligence went to the roof, my evaluation is good, and I can do exit strategy overnight. Because exit strategy is one of the oldest thing that used to take years and years, right? Am I going to sell my business? I'm not going to sell my business. No, I'm not going to sell my business. Maybe I shouldn't. Well, ask an AI. It will tell you, move to the next zip code, you can make more money, right? Open the store in the pink. They will love it because you open it up in the green and nobody cares to come in, right? So I say all of that because I talk with businesses all day long, but I have to humanize it, right? And once you start humanizing who you are and what your customers are and what are they looking for and how are they getting those information, what is their mechanism of labeling, you start thinking differently, right? And large language model enables you to do that, right? Now put that large language model into your business, it will start labeling things on your behalf. It will start making those decisions on your behalf. And if you let it mature for long enough, it will make those decisions so frequently that you can predict off of it, right? So it's a great conversation because we kind of went from why, how. Now that we're talking about what, this what part is so like 15 minutes, no more. Why and how is immense. Like it can go on forever. Like I said, it's a rabbit hole that me and Lucky and Bobby, we always do in episodes. But this what part is very simple. It's not going to change much. It's always going to have data. And those data will need some identifying. And those data, these through processing, has to be labeled correctly, tried and true, right? And then has to make a good decision, right? Which is that use case of. So if your Tesla cars is making bad decisions, trust me, you're not going to drive it again. If your autopilot in the aircraft was not landing correctly, trust me, you're not going to use it again. You're going to take over that decision. You're not going to outsource it anymore. So I guess my takeaway here, for after talking to so many business people about this information, is that what you have to do next is a matter of sitting down and not getting on a large language model and tell all of your employees to start using large language model, right? What you have to do is literally sit down with yourself and understand you don't have to do things like you've done 15 years for the last 15 years. You can do things differently now. Mm-hmm. But the best part of it is that you can afford it because almost all of this stuff is for free, right? And if you can afford it, and if you can identify what's cheap and affordable, you can label it correctly for the usage in your business. And now you can see, okay, I made that. So if you guys will grab me a few seconds, I want to talk about this real quick. Archive data. If you have archive data and you say like, well, I have a bunch of archive data on the back of my desktop. If you can make a system, which we do with agentic AIs, let that system make the same decisions you made 10 years ago, 5 days ago, 5 years ago, 5 months ago, and see how it made those decisions. If it made a bad decisions, you know it's not matured enough. But by the time it gets so good that it made a better decisions than you, I think you know where I'm going with this, right?
Then you have a winner.
System is ready to go to production.
Mhm.
Instead of you being the CEO, let the system be your CEO. You just work for the CEO.
That's the whole point of utilizing it, right? You can't work for it and on it. That takes too much.
Work for it and own it. Well put. So that's my
Logic.
wife here, but yeah, let's wrap this up. I guess
That's why you need a twin, right? Twin. Where have you been?
See, this isn't lucky. This is actually the twin. This is the only way you can tell is the other one doesn't have this. So yeah. But yeah, I'd like to be able to see if we can, get Vaughn back, and really, promote what she does. At the end, we're here. We build a platform for AI, but it's a platform for veterans to be able to build and learn. And so I'd like to have her back, and we can do this again.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on that note, ay, 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 ay.
I'm awake.
I know, wake up.
Well, you know what?
Coffee,
The
baby.
I is now like ay.
Ay, ay, ay.
I knew that. So, Bobby, any departing thoughts?
No, it's just been a wonderful experience as always. I'm looking forward to having our special guest return. I am just really excited about that. And thank you all, as always, for always contributing so much to my little tiny brain. Thanks.
Masako?
Be great on purpose.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well said.
And this is one more of a personal note. Tough times right now in the world, and a lot of times you find yourself, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And then you got to change your state of mind. Is how can I make this? How do I change this? How do I make this work for me? How do I? And so sometimes it just takes a different perspective. Instead of making it work against you, make it work for you at the end. And so be positive, guys out there. Everyone's struggling, but make things work for you. Be aggressive. Change your state of mind. Own who you are and do your best, guys. And at the end, if anything, if all you have is your two hands, you also have family and friends. And then at the end, there'll be the wind in your sails to kind of help you get through things. So thank you all again for being my friends and family.
Thank you. Thank you. Till
Absolutely.
next time, everybody take care of yourself. Ay, 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 it's out.
Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay.
Aye, aye.